Hello, I've been streaming on Twitch a little bit lately, mostly gaming, but recently I've also been doing some programming. I've been working on the pick and place machine, and I've also been fiddling around with Onshape, Fusion 360, and even FreeCAD, would you believe? But anyway, this is the software that I use to send the stream to Twitch. It's OBS, it's what everyone's using it seems like, and it has some pretty cool features, or actually what we're going to look at today is a plugin that lets you interface with external MIDI hardware over USB. So one of the first things I found myself wanting to do was to put a little overlay on the screen like this to say that I was not there, but I would be back soon, right? So we've got this, and we can turn it off and on by clicking on here with the mouse. We've got this other one we can change as well. And we can also use our mouse to come over here and change the volume of this default audio as whatever the computer is doing. So the game audio in most cases. You can change that here, and then there's my microphone. As you can see, I'm using that to record the video right now. And if I move this one down, it goes, and if we put it back up here, it comes loud again. So that's all very well, but you need to use the mouse to do that, which is a little bit inconvenient if you're playing a game, and some games, or quite a lot of games actually, they capture the mouse. So I'm not able to move the mouse over to my second monitor and fiddle with the OBS controls. So I need to Alt-Tab out of the game, and most often what happens when you do that is the stream goes black for a few seconds, and sometimes even the position of windows on the screen moves around and things get a bit weird. So what's really nice is if you don't have to Alt-Tab, and that's what this MIDI plugin lets you do. So let's see what the name of this is. So it's called OBS MIDI MG. That's the name of the plugin. And what I've got set up here is, so this button here, if I push that, we'll see back soon show up. Don't need to Alt-Tab or anything. Over here I've got that one. This is the webcam. And then I've got the slider for the default audio volume here. Microphone on this one, and everything works great. I love it. Thing is though, I wasn't really planning on using this MIDI controller to do that. I kind of want to free this up to do other things with, play some funky drums on these things, And it's also very big. It takes up a lot of space on the desk here. So just recently I have added USB MIDI support to the iomixer. That's one of those things there. And I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be nice to make a little DIY stream deck kind of thing? So I've set this one up with the potentiometer. This is just an analog input. And you can see this slider there, the middle one, is being controlled by this potentiometer there. And also when I change the volume of this, oh sorry, you can't hear what I'm saying. But when I make the volume of this go all the way down to 0, you'll see a little red light flashing on the iomixer like this. Okay, so I'll have to remember that it's muted when I do that. But the purpose of that is because occasionally I would go away and make a coffee or something, so I'd put this on, and then I'd mute that so it was muted. But then when I came back with my coffee, I'd just forget about it because my OBS monitor is usually not this big. It's a lot smaller, and it's on another monitor that I'm not really looking at so much. So I would just continue talking to nobody with this back soon thing on while I'm playing the game, which is rather amateurish, don't you think? So I wanted to have something that would sort of flash a light at me if I was in a state where it's like not quite ready to go. Anyway, so in this video I thought I might go through the complete start to finish setup of how you might make one of these DIY stream decks if you happen to have one of these iomixers, because there's not too much to it. If I just hide this webcam here again, you'll see on the left there, that is the setup for the potentiometer. It's just an analog input that goes into a MIDI out node, and you just need to set what the index is of that, and that's about it. So what I'm going to do is, oops, now I need my webcam again. So I came across these potentiometers that I pulled out of a very, very old Futaba radio. It was actually the first radio that I got in Japan when I was living there, and I pulled these off it because they're quite nice potentiometers, regular switches, this kind of thing. You know what these are like, right? Couple of dials like that, and I also have a momentary switch which might be good for something as well. So I'm going to make a little box to put all these on. This is the box design that I came up with. I didn't really calculate this design myself. I discovered this site here where you can put in a bunch of parameters like that, and it will generate in this case a sort of a box with a diagonal piece on the front of it that they're calling console. But there are tons and tons of other designs they have too. quite fancy ones like this, but mine is going to be much simpler. And then you can just download it as a DXF, which is very handy. So I did that, and then I just brought it into Onshape so I could extrude it like this and put it together as a three-dimensional object, just to check that everything was going to be lining up okay. And I also wanted to add these cutouts on the front in that pattern like that for my control knobs to poke through. And I think on the back here, this piece here, I'm not going to make this bit because I did a test cut on the laser cutter of a smaller box of this style of assembly, and I managed to get it put together, but it was very, very tight. These pieces only just kind of fit in together without breaking, and I had to use a big block of wood and bang on it quite a bit to get it together, and it's never coming apart. So I don't want to put something on the back that I'm never going to be able to get off, so it's just going to be open at the back, I think. And then to generate the G-code for that, I'm just going to use DXF to G-code like this, and we're going with 100% laser power and 100 millimeters per minute. So let's go and cut this. I altered the kerf size for this cut this time to make it a little bit easier to get these on, and I find that I can just kind of wiggle it on like that, pressing it in, and it gets it about halfway on, which I think is probably perfect. Wow, these fit really well. Oh my goodness. Wow, that website's pretty cool, isn't it? Okay, here's the front panel with all the bits stuck on it there. I've got 5 analog inputs and 5 digital inputs. The iomixer can do up to 6 analog inputs, so I could have gone a little bit more, but not much more than that. Digital inputs though, we could do lots and lots of them. And on the back I've got 3 wires on the analog inputs, and then for these ones just 1 on each of those. And now I have everything plugged in. The analog inputs need to go on the yellow pins, that's those yellow pins there at the back, and the digital ones can go pretty much anywhere, so that's kind of convenient. This is how it fits into the box, just enough space there. These wires are quite stiff, so it's actually holding in place quite nicely. I think I'll just leave it like that. Okay, I have everything nicely set up in the box now, and I've added an extra RGB LED strip on top so that I can see these lights from the front. There are actually some RGB LEDs on the iomixer, but they're way up inside there, so I'm not going to be able to see those from where I'm sitting. The colorful blinking lights pattern that's showing there is a test program that's probably what will be on the iomixer when you get one, but we want to change that to our own program, and we do that with this web interface configurator thingy. But in order to talk to the iomixer, it needs to go through something called a relay server. As you can see at the moment, we're looking at the relay server panel and it's not connected. So to start that up, it's just this exe file there, and I'm going to double click on that to start it, and hopefully we should see it finding something there. So there's a there's an iomixer on COM 8, and why does it sometimes do this? Alright, so it's a little bit slow on Windows. A lot of people have told me this too. It takes forever. It can take up to 30 seconds sometimes. I don't know why it's so slow on Windows. On Linux and Mac, it's just like bang. But anyway, so we don't need to look at this relay server, but it does need to be running in the background in order to use the web configurator thingy. So let's go back to this. Another thing you'll need to do is click on this checkbox here to enable or to say that this iomixer on COM 8 is the one that you want to be communicating with. Another website which you might want to use for this MIDI stuff, it's very useful. It's called Hardware Tester, hardwaretester.com/MIDI, and it will let you detect the MIDI devices that are connected to the system, and down here you can see what kind of events they are sending as well. It's very handy. And as you can see at the moment, it says no MIDI devices detected, even though the iomixer is plugged in, and that's because by default the iomixer is not a MIDI device. We need to tell it to be a MIDI device, so we do that. Currently it's under the gamepad panel. The names and locations of some of these things may change in future, but the way it is at the moment, it's in the gamepad panel, and we need to select what the USB class should be. At the moment it's just a virtual COM port, but we want it to be virtual COM port and MIDI, so we'll select that one and click set USB class, and it says please power cycle the device to restart with the new class type, and that just means that we want to turn it off and on, or in this case power it down by unplugging it and then power it up again by plugging it back in. So now it should be, in addition to a virtual COM port, it should be a MIDI device as well. So we have some analog inputs and some digital inputs. So I'll go to this nodes panel here and I'll click on analog input, and I'll also click on digital input while I'm here. So we've got one of each, and I'll just set up this dial here, or this slider here. That's one of my analogs, and I'll set up, say, that switch there, and the others will all be the same, so I won't bother doing them in the video, but one of each should be enough to let you see how it works. So we need to know what pin these are on. I happen to know this one is on, let me go to the properties here. This is on pin 19. Oh, sorry, no, wait, 19, 20, 21. The middle one is on pin 21. There we go. And that digital input there is on 6, 7, 8. That should be on pin 8. Like that. And if we just upload that now, this is not quite going to work, but I'll show you what it does. Then if we go to show up in the top corner, we'll see these live value enabling things show up. So I'll click on there so that we're enabling that, and I'll click on there so that we're enabling that. These are a little bit flaky at the moment. I think I might know how to fix it, but for the time being, if they don't work, just click on them again. So if I get my camera back here. So anyway, when I turn this dial, oops, not that one, this one. When I move this slider like that, we'll see the value of this going down and up. And when we flip the switch on this digital input, that's this one, it should be. It's not going to work because the way I've arranged these switches is so that when it's in the up position, the signal pin is going to be connected to ground, so it's going to be grounded. But when it's down like that, it's going to be floating, so there's no input. So what I need to do for the case of these switches, at least the way I've set them up for this, is in the settings here I need to say that this pin should be pulled up like that. So if I upload this now we should see that when I flip the switch, we're getting a 0 when it's up and a 1 when it's down. So that's working nicely as well. Now if we go back to this analog, we'll notice that when I go all the way down here, it doesn't go to 0, it goes to 0.35. When I go all the way up, it goes to 0.61, which is a bit strange. So I don't know quite why they've built these sliders like that, but that's the way they made them. But we can calibrate these. The way that the calibration works is by default, it just assumes that you're going to have a potentiometer that goes all the way to each side. These dials, incidentally, they do go pretty much all the way from 0 to 1. So it's just filled these in by default, but you can set your own values. So I could calibrate this so that the lowest value is 0.35 and the highest value is 0.6, whatever it was. And so I could type those in. Oh, just click on this first. This properties panel only shows you the thing that you're currently selected, like this. So if I select this now, so I could type that in here, or the other thing I could do is switch from, instead of using a already calibrated value, which is what we're doing here, we know this calibration is not right, but what we can do is just look at the raw values that are coming from the potentiometer. And so you need to upload once to get that to happen. Now because our calibration was on 0 to 1, this is not going to change anything, but we can change the calibration. We can delete those, and we can instead click on this calibrate checkbox there and there. And what that will do is it will automatically fill in the min and the max values with the lowest and highest values that it has seen from this sensor. So if I go all the way down, it fills the lowest one in with 0.35, and if I go all the way up like this, it fills that in with 0.61 something. So then you uncheck the calibrates and put it back to calibrated and upload. So now when we go all the way down, we get 0-ish, and all the way up 1-ish. So that might be alright, but I don't really like the way it jitters like that, because you never quite get to the perfect value, or you might be able to get it if you push it a bit like that. See, I can get it to say 1, but I want it to say 1 all the time when it's up the top. So if you want to do that, you will actually have to tweak these values a little bit. You'll have to make the lower value a little bit higher, so let's make that 0.36, and the higher value a little bit lower, so 0.61 say. I think that should work, and then upload. So now when I go all the way down, I get a 0 that just sits there nice and quietly, and all the way up I get a 1 that just sits there nice and quietly. Good. Alright, so now we want to bring these values into OBS via MIDI somehow, and the way we do that is by adding a MIDI output node. So it's an output from iomixer's point of view, right? And let's just make a bit more space here. I actually want 2 of these, so I'm going to copy and paste it over here, 1 for each. And then on this one, we're going to say, or for both of them actually, I can select both of these like this. Oops. And I want to say that instead of a note event, we're sending a control channel or a control change. And the channel that it's on, it's a little bit awkward because on Windows at least, it seems that channel 0 is what we need here to get channel 1 in OBS. But yeah, so it's 0 indexed here. So if you find that this doesn't work, just try 1 instead of a 0 or vice versa. The index or the channel, the word channel is coming up too much, isn't it? But the number that we want to use for this is going to be, well, you can sort of choose any number you like between, I think, 1 and 127. But some of these channels do have specific meanings in MIDI, the traditional MIDI, if you're using them with musical instruments. I don't think OBS cares about that, but I have found that generally values 15 through 25 or so work quite well. So I'm going to use 15 for this, and the payload comes from here. And then on this one, we want to do the same thing, except I'm going to use index 16 for that one. So I'll change that to 16. And then the payload comes from this digital input. And then we upload that. Looks good. Now let's go over to OBS. And OBS, sometimes it seems like it does not detect a new MIDI device unless the MIDI device already existed when OBS started. But let's see what it does. So I'll go to this plugin. Oh, look at that. It found it already. So iomixer showed up. That's good. But I just remembered that I also wanted to show you this website. So let's have a look over here. Oh, this showed up as well. Okay, that's good. I thought I might have to reload this page. But it looks like it's figured that out by itself. And if you have more than one MIDI device, you might need to select them from here, but I only have the one. And if I scroll down here a little bit, ooh, we can see some events are showing up. So let's see what happens. Is that coming from here? It is coming from here. Perfect. All right, so my slider's going there, and you can see this is control change or control channel 15. It's going down from 0 to 127. So that's the range of values that you get from a MIDI signal. That's all you're going to get. And then the switch here jumps all the way from 0 to 127 in one go, like that. This is just another quick way you can check. Like I say, OBS tends to be a little bit trickier to get things listening and working. Okay, let's go back to OBS and we'll look at that plugin again. So this is the setup for the plugin, and you can see the ones here I have already from what I showed you at the beginning of the video. I need to add another thing in there, but we also first need to say what device we're going to use. And if I click on this, you'll see we have options for enabling this device for input and output. And if it doesn't show up, but I think you might be able to get it to show up by doing check MIDI device capabilities, perhaps. And if it still doesn't show up, you might have to close OBS and then make sure the iomixer was plugged in first before you start OBS. I had that a couple of times, but I'm not having it today for some reason. Anyway, I want to do input and output from this device, so I'm going to click on here. What? Ooh. Okay, this is another thing. I think because we're using this here, right? On Windows, it also seems to be the case that you can't have two things using the MIDI input. So if I close this so that it's not, already using that, and then, oh no, do I have to restart OBS? Let's come back in here again. Oh, I think because I had the web page thing running, I have to restart OBS. Bloody hell. What if I click this again? Oh, okay. All right. There we go. So you should be able to click on here and it'll go blue. And then also for output, we want both of these to be blue and say connected there. That's good. So now I need to set up a binding, and binding just means a connection between the MIDI device and some sort of an OBS function. So you click plus here, and you can double click this to rename it. I'm just going to call this iomixer tests, or tests, yeah. And then the pencil icon here will let you configure the details. So I have an untitled binding here as a default. If you click on there, you'll see you have a green section and a red section. The green section is some kind of event that will come from the MIDI device, and the red section is some kind of function inside OBS that will be controlled by that. You can do the opposite as well by clicking on this up-down button, which we'll have a look at a little bit later. But for now, let's just select the MIDI device we want to listen to, which is iomixer. And you can type all these in here. For example, we know that we want a control change, like there's options in there for control change, right? We know it's going to be channel 1, we know it's going to be note 15, at least for my potentiometer. And you can fill these in automatically if you click on this, it says not listening for messages. Let me just get my webcam up, hold on. So you can see what's going on over there. All right, so at the moment it says not listening for messages. Now, as soon as I click this, if this potentiometer is jittering a little bit, a message will come through and all of these values will be filled in automatically. I just want to make sure that doesn't happen, so I'm going to put it down here where it's going to be 0, and I know it's not jittering, because I just want to show you how when you click this button, it says listening for messages once, and this remains blue while it's listening for something to come from some MIDI event. So if I move my slider now, you'll see that it says not listening for messages because it just got one, and these values got filled in. So it found a control change event on channel 1, control number 15, and the value was 1 because I moved it from 0 to 1. But if I was about halfway and I did that listening again, now it's at about 76, right? One thing that I kind of get confused about sometimes is how these things are set up here. What we've just done by leaving this equals selected is we're saying we want to listen for when this control number goes to the exact value of 76. But that's not what we want. We want to listen to all the range, all the way from 0 up to 127. We want to listen to everything coming from this slider. So to do that, you can click on MIDI here so that we get 0 to 127. So that's the input that we're listening for, anything in that range. And then to control something in OBS, I think what I'll do is I'll control the volume of this default audio thing there. So we want to see this slider moving as a result of our external device. So to do that, we select category of control is audio sources. We want to change the source volume. The audio source is default audio, that one. And then you can change it as a percentage or as a decibels value. I tend to find the decibels one seems to be a little bit more sensible. And again, down here, we don't want to set it to 0 because this equals means what's going to happen is when we get a message over here, we're going to set the volume to a value equal to 0. It's not what we want, right? What we want, again, is this MIDI range. So we're going to take a value 0 to 127, and we're going to put it into a value like that. Now, if I move my slider, we'll see, wow, down here, we've got the volume changing like that. And it seems like when you get to the top, it moves really quickly. I'm not quite sure how to get around that. But there's this other thing here, which is called, what is this, custom MIDI range. So for some reason it's those values. So it's scaling my 0 to 127 here to be negative 100 to 27 there. And we don't really want to go to 27 because we can only go up to 0 in these decibels, right? So you can double click here, that'll start flashing, and you can put a 0 in so that the upper value of the range is going to be 0. That gives you a little bit more fine-tuned control. And you can get even more by saying, for example, instead of going all the way down to 100, we only want to go in the range of, let's say, 35, minus 35. So I'll put minus 35 in there. And now you'll see that my slider goes up to 0 at the top, and then all the way down, it goes down to minus 35, or at least that's what I thought it was going to do. Minus 35 is there. But anyway, the MIDI part of the iomixer seems to be working okay. Let's see what we can do with the switch. So that's this one, and I need another binding for this. So let's call this default audio volume while I'm here. Default audio volume, and I'll make another binding, and I'll call this one back soon overlay, and then I'll put this down so we're not that's going to be quiet, so there's going to be no jittering if it's down there, because I want to make sure that when I do this I'm only listening for that event. So let's put this to iomixer, and then I'll listen for messages. Got a message there, and this time I'm going to choose this one here, which is toggle between values. So it's either going to be a 0 or a 127, which is what we have on the switch, right? And the thing that we want to control with this is of the video source, and we want to display the source or not. The scene is main desktop and the source is back soon. That's handy, they're already selected. And again, we don't want to set this value to be equal to show, we want to toggle it. So we've got a toggle here and a toggle here. That's probably what you want. So when we do that, oops, is it working? Oh, okay, it's working, but it's backwards. So one thing we could do is revert or invert that in the iomixer configuration. Another thing you could do is set it so that it's off, and then in OBS you can, let me just get out of here. In OBS you can use the mouse to set it once there, so that now when I put the switch down it shows up, and up it goes away. I might have to restart OBS to see if that setting sticks, I'm not sure. Or I might have to make sure that the switch is up when OBS starts, because when OBS starts that's going to be off, I think. Anyway, it's working. That's what I want to do. So the other inputs here, all these other things are just the same as what I just did, and all these are the same as what I did for the digital, so I'm not going to bother doing that in this video, of course. But what I do want to show you is how we can get output from OBS to the iomixer, and I'm just going to control some lights with that. So to start off, we'll just set the volume, the brightness of these lights to match. I think I'll use this volume here, this slider, and what we want to do there is we'll go into plugin again, come into here, edit, and we need a new binding, and I'm going to call this lights, just lights will do. And this time we're not going from a MIDI event to controlling OBS. So we're not going from green to red. We want to click this up down arrow so it switches the ordering of these around so that we've got red on the left and green on the right. And this time we're selecting something in OBS that we want to listen to a change from to control something on the iomixer. And I want to listen to a audio source, volume changed. It is the Droid Cam OBS. And again, we'll go with decibels and MIDI range there. And over here, the device that we want to send a notification or an event to is the iomixer. And we want a control change, channel 1, control number. Doesn't matter too much really, but well, you can't set this to one that you're using already. So I'll just set it to 14 because I was using a 15 and 16 for the other ones. And the value is going to be this MIDI range here, 0 to 127. So I think that's all we need to do there, but nothing's going to happen because we didn't set up anything in the iomixer, so I'll just close that out there. Let's go back to this, and this time we want a MIDI in. So from the point of view of the iomixer, this is a MIDI input. And we want to set this to a control change. You can set channel to -1, we'll listen to any channel. And the index that I had for the number of this was 14, right? So now if I upload this, and if I turn this on, we'll see it's 0 at the moment, but if I get my OBS window back, when I move this, you'll see over here, this value is now responding to what I'm doing in OBS. And it's a little bit choppy because I think the more of these you have enabled, the choppier the display or the update rate on these things gets. So let me just turn those ones off. It should be a little bit smoother now. There we go. Anyway, so you can see my output in OBS, or my slider in OBS, is controlling the output on the iomixer. So from there I can just connect that to, I don't know, a servo or something. But I'm just going to put some lights on, and I have 4 LEDs on that light bar at the top, so I'm going to control all of them with this. So it's LEDs 1 to 4. And let me just get my camera up so you can see what happens when I upload that. I'll just click, click upload, and you can see the lights come on there. And then I've got to shift this. I really wish I could make this window go on top permanently like you can on Linux. That would be nice. It just doesn't seem to be possible on Windows. Anyway, so if I move the slider, you can see all the way down there we get nothing. All the way up here we get LEDs, bright. So to go a little bit further, if we want those LEDs to be red, we could use a color like this, make that color red, and make it really bright like that. And then instead of directly putting the color in there like that, which is going to give us hold on, it's going to give us just red, solid red, right, bright red. What we want to do actually is use a scale node, or you could use either a binary operator with a multiply. Actually, let's do that. There's also scale, which I find a little bit more convenient sometimes. It's just a little bit smaller too, but you can do it either way. Anyway, so we'll take this color, instead of putting it directly in there, we'll put it through this multiply, and we'll multiply it by whatever value we're getting from the OBS slider, and that will go out into color like that. So if we upload that, then we come back to OBS, we should see now we have it scaling as we did before, but it's scaling to red instead of just white. And then if we want to make it flash like I was showing you at the beginning of the video, we can have a strobe node. So the strobe will come, where does the strobe go? Strobe goes immediately after the color, like this, and it will just flash it off and on. So if I upload that, it's going off and on like that, and that's by default once per second. You can fiddle around with this pattern here to have other patterns like this. You can do something like that. You can see it's like flashing in a different pattern now, and you could fill these in to like make it however you want. I wanted it to be pretty simple. Instead of using this graphical thing, you can also just type a pattern in here. So I can just type 0 and 1. If I upload that, oh, now it's flashing once per second very quickly because the pattern is like this. But what I can also do is set the pattern to be shorter, or the number of ticks in the pattern to be shorter. So I only want 2 actually. There we go. So now we've got just this tiny little pattern like that. If I upload this, we'll see now it's flashing very fast, so fast that you can't actually see that in the camera, but we can slow that down by a factor of, say, 6, I think. I was playing around with this yesterday. A factor of 6, and upload that. All right, so that's what I want. That's going to catch my attention. but I only want it to be flashing like that when I'm actually muted, right? So let's add a check so that the flashing only happens when it's muted. And for that we can do another binary operator. And so let's put this back large again. Alright, so I have a binary operator, and I'm going to use that to check if the volume coming out of this MIDI control is less than a certain value. So I'll set this to less than the certain value. I'm going to go with 0.1. And this is now sort of a condition that we could give a name to, and I'm going to give the name is muted. So it can be helpful to name things like this, just to let you remember what they were. So we need to make a decision based on whether we're muted or not. If we're muted, we want the output from this, and just move all that stuff away. We don't really need the scale anymore. So if we're muted, we want that. If we're not muted, I want to make it green. So let's make another color down here, and I'll set this one to green just for now, not so bright, like that. So that's green. And to select between these two, we can use a selector node. And I might change the name of these properties here, because most people would recognize this better if they were called if then else, which is what the names of those will probably become in future. But anyway, if is muted, then red. Call this one flashing red, so I can show red. And this one's green. Well, we'll just leave it like that. Alright, so that should give us flashing red if we're muted, otherwise green. And we'll put this into my LEDs 1 to 4 and upload. And then we'll go back to all these, so many windows. Okay, so it's green. That is green, believe me, yes. And if we put the volume of this, okay, see now it's not doing anything when we slide until we get to below the 0.1 mark. And then it says, hey dummy, you're muted. Don't forget to unmute. And then when I unmute, it's like green. Everything is good. So that's about all I wanted to set up, at least in this video. Actually, there's one more thing. You know, when I put this on, I also want the red flashing to be showing me, to be flashing red when I do that. So it's either if it's muted, or that's on, right? So to check if it's, check if the switch is on or if this is on, you can use one of these binary operator nodes with an OR. So this could be set to be logical OR. And remember this first switch we had. This is back soon, right? Back soon showing. Boom. And this is also like a true false sort of a value. So I can say, it's getting a bit long now, but if it's back soon showing or is muted like this, whoop, see, back soon showing or muted, then so the test is not just muted. Back soon or muted, right? And then the test is going to be from this one. So the wires are getting a little bit sort of tangled up there, but I could probably do this to tidy them up a little bit. Something like that. Anyway, upload that. Let's see what happens. Alright, so if it's back soon, we need to show the flashing reds. Or, if it's muted, flashing reds. And definitely if they're both on, we definitely want the flashing reds. Perfect. And it's all pretty easy to set up too. So yeah, I'll do the same for these other other 8 inputs that I have on my fancy little box. And I'll probably come up with some other ideas or things to use these for with OBS as well. But this video is way too long, and so I'll just thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.